Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. Um, I'm gonna start sharing my screen. So I would, yeah, there we go. Just 1 second, and we'll see if it works. Okay, is it working? Just let me know, please.
Yes, it works very well.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you all for having me here today. My name is Marcio Cots. I'm an European and Brazilian lawyer specialized in cyber law. I'm also the Chief Operating Officer for Get Global International. Get Global International is an American data privacy consulting company. We are an official ICSIN training partner, and we also operate in Brazil. And we've been doing, a great job in training people in Brazil to become a data protection officer. Well, a little bit about myself. I think Sam has said something about me, but I've been working with internet and law for more than 20 years. I've managed more than 100 data privacy management programs in different multinationals and big companies all around the world. And today we are going to talk about what you need to achieve to become a DPO. A DPO
Marcio,
yes?
Can I interrupt? We
Sure.
can see your video, but I couldn't see your shared screen. Can you check if your screen has been shared? Or I can also play your slides as well. Let me know.
Let me see what's going on here. Yeah, just let me know if you can see it.
No, it's good. Now if you, perfect.
Is it working?
Yeah, no, if you can go back to your first slides. It's fine.
Really?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
This one? Okay.
Right.
So today we are going to talk about the DPO, the Data Protection Officer. Data privacy is becoming something very big all around the world. It has started in Europe. Europe has the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. We usually say that there are 3 different standards in the world to regulate how you process personal data. There is the American standard, the European standard, and the Chinese standard. Just to let you know, nowadays, India has been debating the India Data Protection Bill. It might become the 4th standard on regulating data privacy. But I would say that the most, the standard that you are going to find in many different countries in the world probably is the European standard that is regulated on the European General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. This standard is a more restricted standard, so much more data protection compared with the other standards. Even the Chinese standard or the American standard isn't as strict as it is the European standard, the General Data Protection Regulation. Some other countries have followed the European standard, such as Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Australia. Canada has a mix of things, but it also comply with some of the rules that you are going to find on the GDPR. So I would say that the GDPR is probably the kind of standard that any company would want you to follow once you are processing personal data under the company's name, just because it's more restricted. So if you comply with the GDPR, probably you won't have problem under the American or the Chinese standard. And one of the roles that was created by the GDPR is the data protection officer. Some organizations, some companies, and even non-profit organizations that process personal data under certain circumstances, they will have to nominate the data protection officer. And that's become a great opportunity for thousands and thousands, maybe millions of professionals all around the world. It has become a big business. A lot of people wants to become a data protection officer, mostly because many companies are already hiring data protection officers to help them first implement a data protection management program. And after you implement the program, we need someone to be sure that the company is following all the procedures. So there are two different stages depending on where you are going to play this role, in which country you are going to play this role. So I would say that if you are willing to become a DPO and you want to live and work in Europe, probably you won't work so much on implementing a data protection management program, mostly because many European companies have already implemented a data protection management program. So as a DPO, you would be responsible for making sure that the European company is following all the procedures that were implemented in the data protection management program. But if you want to become a DPO in China, in Brazil, in the US, I feel that those countries, even India, you have a great opportunity to work as a DPO, helping companies to implement the data protection management program. And usually those projects are big projects. You have a lot of work, many things to do. And that's pretty much what we are going to talk about here today. We are going to try to understand what you need to achieve to become a data protection officer and help the company implement a data protection management program. Sam, just let me know if you want to translate something.
No, that's fine. But only thing I like to tell, you are still on your first slides. Maybe you can enlarge your slides and play, well, when you speech, because I'm not sure.
Once I do that, you said that you can't see it anymore. Are you able to see it?
Yeah, now it's good. Now it's good. I can see the full screen.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Please go
Very
ahead.
good.
Yeah.
Sure. So as I was saying, this has become a great opportunity, and become a DPO, you probably will be responsible for implementing a data protection management program. And what kind of skills do you need to have to become a data protection management program? For those who don't know much about data privacy, try to picture what would be the ideal data privacy management scenario for a company that wants to comply with the GDPR. First, there is what we call the legal requirements. Any data privacy and data protection rule, they are going to stipulate legal requirements, obligations. The GDPR, for example, there will be basically three major groups of legal requirements. The first legal group of requirements is what the GDPR calls the legal base, the lawful ground. So under the GDPR, you can't process personal data without having at least one legal base, at least one legal, one lawful ground. Under the GDPR, there are 6 different legal bases, 6 different circumstances where you will be able to process personal data compliant with the GDPR. For example, one of them is the consent. If you get the consent from the data subject, you are going to be able to process the personal data. Another example is the execution of a contract. Once you have a contract with a person and you need to execute the contract, you need to fulfill the obligations that you are obligated under that contract. You don't need the data subject consent to process the personal data to fulfill with the contract. So that would be a second legal base. What else? A legitimate interest is another example of a lawful ground, of a legal base under the GDPR. If you are going to process personal data with a legitimate interest, and the GDPR stipulates what's considered legitimate interest, that would also be a legal ground, a legal base, and you would be allowed to process the personal data. So the first thing that you need to worry about is if your company will have a lawful ground, a legal base to process the personal data. That would be the first major group of obligations to any company to comply with the GDPR. The second group of major obligations are what we call principles. Under the GDPR, there are many different data privacy principles. So it means that even having one legal base, it doesn't mean that you can process the personal data in any way. You need to process the data, even having a legal base under GDPR and complying with the principles that will give you the boundaries, the limits to process personal data. One example is the principle of minimization. It means that under the GDPR, you can only process personal data for the purpose that you have the legal base on the limit that you are going to use the only data that is necessary for that specific purpose. The other principle is the right purpose to process personal data. Once you have one purpose, so if you are going to process the personal data for one specific purpose, you can't process the same data for a different purpose if you don't have a legal base for that second, third, and fourth purpose. So those principles are going to give you the boundaries, the limits to process personal data. So it means that you must have a legal ground, but it doesn't mean that you can process the data in different ways. You will have to respect, you have to comply with the principles. So that changed the whole scenario. Companies were used to process personal data, processing personal data for different purposes without getting the consent or without having any legal base. So that changed, and that means that someone will have to help the companies to identify if they have the legal basis and if they are going to respect, to comply with the principles under the GDPR. So that's what we call the legal requirements, the legal obligations. The third major obligation is what we call individuals' rights, or the data subject rights. That means that any individual now called the data subject have their own rights. So any individual will have the right to even request from any company some information, such as, I would like to know what kind of personal data you are processing that I own, or I would also be able, because that would be my right, to even ask you to delete my personal data if you don't have any legal ground to hold and process my own personal data. So there are different individuals' rights under the GDPR that all the companies will also have to comply with. They will have to respect the individual's right. That means that someone will also have to help the company to respect and be able to comply with this kind of obligation. So an ideal scenario is to have a company able to identify the legal grounds, respect the principles, the data privacy principles, and also respect the individual's rights. That's what we call data privacy. But you also need to have a strong environment of information security. It's what we call data protection. So there is a difference between data privacy and data protection. Data privacy is the way you process personal data. And it means that you need to comply with the law and process the personal data compliant with the GDPR. So it means that the way that you are going to use the data, the personal data, should be compliant with the GDPR. But you also need to process the personal data in a very strong information security environment. You must have a very strong data protection environment, mostly because it doesn't matter if the company is going to process the personal data compliant with the law and there is a data breach, a data leak. It means that you are still going to have some legal issues if there is a data breach, and vice versa. It doesn't make sense if the company have a very strong data protection environment, but it doesn't process the personal data lawfully. You are the same way, you are going to still have some legal issues. So that what we would say would be the ideal scenario of a data privacy management program. And someone needs to help the company to work on this. How do we do it? How are we as data privacy professionals, how do we as data protection officers are able to help the companies to comply with all these legal obligations and the individual's rights under a very strong data protection environment? Well, here are the sources and the tools that we have to help the companies comply with all these obligations. First, we need to develop a data privacy policy. Every time that you work with policy, that means that you are going to work with people. So people will play different roles in a data protection management program. Imagine that a company that hasn't done anything on data privacy, no one would be worried about privacy in that company. It's just because it doesn't make part of the company's culture. But now we want this company to have a data privacy culture. We want this company to respect individuals' privacy. So the employees will have to change their mindset, and some of the employees will play different roles within the company. So in this policy, in this data privacy policy, some individuals will play different roles. For example, we are going to nominate the data protection officer, the person who will be responsible for implementing this data protection management program. We will also have some what we call data privacy stars, professionals who will be trained on data privacy, but they are going to be in different areas of the company, and they will help the company and they will help the data protection officer to be sure that the company will comply with all the procedures that we are going to implement the company to make the company comply with the GDPR. So that means that even by developing these data privacy policies, by implementing different data privacy roles, we need to design and implement procedures to operationalize the policy. So the procedures will have to change. The different procedures will have to be implemented in the company to make the company comply with the GDPR. For example, the HR department, the human resource department, the way the department recruits new employees without data privacy process probably won't comply with the GDPR. Just because if the company doesn't have a data privacy culture, it means that the human resource department will still do the things that they are used to do without complying with the GDPR. So we need to identify the procedures and change the procedures in order to make the new procedures compliant with the GDPR. Even marketing, many things that are done by the marketing team will have to change. Different procedures, the way they do it, they do marketing probably is not compliant with the GDPR. So that means that we'll have to identify the procedures and analyze if we will need to change the procedures to comply with the GDPR. So that means that the data privacy policy will also have to design and implement new procedures for every single area of the company that process personal data. And at the end of the day, this data privacy policy will also have procedures to monitor and maintain all these procedures and people playing their data privacy roles in the company. So that means that someone will have to do that. And how do we do it? First, we start doing an assessment. The DPO will have to run an assessment because we need to find all the gaps. So once you run an assessment and identify what kind of data do we process, how do we collect this data, why we collect this data, who do we share this data with, who are our vendors, do we need those vendors, what kind of data we share with those vendors, why we share those data with the vendors, who has access with that personal data. So we need to run an assessment and identify every procedure that process personal data. It's what we call the data life cycle. By doing that, we are going to have the data mapping and the life cycle of the data. And as a DPO, I will try to understand if we have a legal base to process that specific personal data. And then I would be able to identify if that procedure is compliant with all the principles under the GDPR. Are we collecting more data than it's necessary for that purpose? If we are collecting more data than it would be necessary for that purpose, that means that we are not compliant with the principle of minimization. So we need to delete the data that won't be necessary for that purpose. So by running the assessment, we would get together the information we need to have the gap analysis. The gap analysis will identify all the gaps. And then we would be able to propose to the company the change the company would have to make in order to implement a data protection management programs. And once we have implemented this data protection management program, then we would start the second phase of being a data protection officer. Once you have already implemented the data protection management program, now you need to be sure that the company is following those procedures. So you are the one, as a DPO, responsible for monitoring and maintaining this new data privacy culture that you have implemented in the organization. Besides that, under the GDPR, you are going to be the liaison, the focal point between the individual's right and the organization. That means that if any individual wants to request anything from the company related with data protection, they are going to talk with the data protection officer, the DPO. So it's also going to be one of your responsibilities as a data protection officer to be the liaison, the focal point with the individuals with the data subject. And what kind of skills do we need to get to become a data protection officer? First of all, you need to understand the legal aspects of data privacy. You don't need to be a lawyer to be a data protection officer, but you need to get some legal training on data privacy. So that's why ICSIN has one specific certification for the legal aspect of data privacy. It's what ICSIN calls the foundation certification on data privacy. This certification pretty much is going to try to identify if you have the legal knowledge of data privacy to become a data protection officer. Because if you are the one who is going to be responsible for helping the company comply with the legal obligations under the GDPR, it means that you must know and have knowledge of the legal aspects of data privacy. So that's the first kind of knowledge that you should have. But not having all the knowledge on the legal aspect of data privacy will make you able to help the company comply with the law, because we need to run an assessment, we need to identify procedures, we need to identify the right people to play data privacy roles in the company. Sometimes we need to implement data privacy softwares that you will be able to find in the market that will help you in managing all these obligations, in identifying the right legal base, in respecting the individual's rights. So it doesn't have anything to do with legal aspects. That's more management. So we'll have also to learn how to manage data privacy, how to run an assessment, how to change procedures, how to change the company's culture. A lawyer doesn't do that. You can be a lawyer and get this kind of knowledge, but it doesn't have anything to do with the legal aspect of data privacy. But at the end of the day, you will have the legal knowledge. You are going to learn how to manage all these new procedures. That's why ICSIN has the second certification and requires you to get this second certification to become a DPO. That's the practitioner certification. The practitioner wants to know if you have all the management aspect of managing data privacy. But you also need to have information security knowledge. As I said before, you have the legal obligations. You are going to manage these legal obligations, but if there is a data leak, a data breach, it means that you haven't done a great job. So that means that any DPO needs to have at least some knowledge on information security. And that would be the third certification required by ICSIN to recognize you as a DPO. You should get your information security certification. Just to let you know, as many of you already know, ISO have their 27.1 standard, but ISO has the brand new 27701 certification. That's information security and privacy. So information security is also something very important for anyone who wants to become a data protection officer. That would be the kind of knowledge that you should have to become a data protection officer. But nowadays, I would say that you also need soft skills. Because as a data protection officer, you are going to interact with so many different areas of the company that you definitely need to get some soft skills to interact with different areas of the company. And at the end of the day, we don't want you to be the no man, the professional that says no for everything. So if someone wants to start a new project and they need to ask the DPO if that project can goes on regarding data protection, and you goes like no, and no, you say no for everything, it means that the company won't move forward. So we want you to be the partner of every area in advising them on how to comply with data privacy. That means that you also need soft skill. This is something that Ixin is not going to request from you. It's just my opinion. And it's also my opinion that would be good if you have a good knowledge of your company's business. Once you learn what your company does, that will make you a better data protection officer. For example, if you are, for example, IBM DPO or Fujitsu's DPO, that means that probably, even being the data protection officer, you should know something about innovation, something about technology, mostly because it's the core business of your company. So that company will innovate new projects. We need to call the DPO, and the DPO will have to help the company to keep innovating, privacy by design, respecting data privacy. So if you are going to be the DPO, play the DPO role in a company like that, you should have some knowledge on innovation. But if, for example, you are going to be the DPO of a big retail chain or a big e-commerce as Alibaba, probably you should know a little bit about digital marketing, mostly because it's the core business of your company. As a DPO, I should know a little bit about it and help my company be compliant with data privacy, but being sure that the company will be able to move forward and keep doing business. Well, that's pretty much what I had for today. Once again, Get Global International is a data privacy consulting company. So if you want to follow us on our social media like LinkedIn, Instagram, or even Telegram, we have a very good Telegram group with we share great content on data privacy every day. We would definitely appreciate to have you following us in any social media that you like.
Right. Thank you very much, Marcio, for your wonderful experience. And also, we really appreciate being our first international speaker to kick off our DPO club in China. So that's something worthwhile to be memorized for the future. I think from your webinar, I also learned the role of DPO, not necessarily for the lawyer itself, but also for relevant for many departments. You mentioned like marketing, HR, every department who are dealt with data, which need to be relevant. So once again confirm about the proposition of the certification as well. I think the PDPF, the foundation, it can be for everyone who deal with data, not really from the legal or compliance department. So I also think as DPO of the company, probably to get your job easier, maybe you also need to promote the awareness of your other peers and colleagues from other departments to get certified, to get the basic understanding of the privacy and GDPR. And I'm also amazed by what you summarize, the 5 key elements of what the competence is required like from the legal perspective, from the management perspective, and also soft skill is very important because you need to deal with everybody in the organization. We say sometimes where's people, where's politics. So you need to have enough IQ and EQ and to deal with people with soft skills. But that's also relevant, of course, the case like you mentioned, Alibaba. You need to understand your business, right? Because every industry have their own characteristics. So once again, thanks very much. And I like to keep you stay with us a little bit more for interaction sessions.
Sure.
I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, so I can be facilitate with people who have also listened to your webinar. And later there will be more people to watch the replay. I was just as host, I will take advantage. I will first kick off the first question for me. We mentioned earlier that in Brazil is leading country in GDPR certification with DPOs, as my colleague in Milena was shared. I want to share also get some insight from your side. Why do you think in Brazil there are so many needs for DPO certifications, and also why so many law firms offer the DPO certifications? Before you answer the questions, I will also say it again in Chinese to help our audience to get the question clear, right? 我刚才下面一个环节就是提问问题哈，我刚才对他的这个分享做了一个总结或者做了一个这个反馈哈，表示了感谢。那后面其实利用这个机会啊，我们可以其实做一些互动。那我刚才问他了一个问题，就是为什么开篇我说了哈，为什么要找一个巴西的一个专家？虽然他在美国的律所哈，那其实就是我注意到在我们全球的隐私保护认证里面，巴西走的是最前面的。在巴西的 DPO 已经快上千了，然后呢，整个的隐私的认证呢，一年就有几千个认证哈，所以而且多数的呢，它都不是 IT 背景的，多数是律所组织的，还有这个就是相关的这个 lawyer 这边提供一个增值的服务。所以我刚才虽然讲到，虽然 Exxon 这个隐私保护呢，它不只面向律师背景、法律背景的人，它可能会面向企业各个部门需要跟数据打交道的部门的这个 employee 哈，这个它都需要一个 PDPF 这个 foundation awareness。但是作为 DPO 这样的一个认证为什么在巴西却受到这样的一个关注哈？当然我们还有一点我跟大家剧透一下哈，在巴西呢，由于这个认证的受到这个欢迎程度，甚至 Exxon 会考虑结合一些巴西本地的隐私保护的法规，在 GDPR 基础上再加一些 localized flavor。当然我相信如果在中国我们有相关的法规以后，我们可能也会考虑做一些本地化哈，结合一下。所以我就问了这样一个问题啊，后面如果其他有问题的话，也可以在聊天里面打进来。当然刚才提交那里面已经有些问题了，所以我先让他来回答一下，为什么巴西会在这方面走得这么前面哈，起码从这个 DPO 的认证的角度来说。Okay, Marcio, so please.
Yeah, very good question. Actually, I feel that the reason why Brazil is has so many DPOs already, mostly because it's a great opportunity. So many people saw that it would be a great opportunity to either switch careers or even start a new career. And as you can see, in the 5 different things that I have mentioned, to become a DPO, you are a mix of different things. You need the legal aspects, the management aspect, information security. So that means that the way I see it is that many law firms in Brazil, the reason why many law firms started providing training programs to become a DPO, it was just because they saw they were the first to saw the opportunity. That's the only reason. Because nowadays, not only law firms, but information security companies and even consulting companies are starting to have their own training program. Because you can have a legal background and become a data privacy professional. You can have a consulting background and become a data privacy professional. You can have information security background and become a data privacy professional as well. So I don't see that you must be a lawyer or a law firm to become a training partner or become a DPO. in Brazil, it has happened just because I think that the lawyers were the first to see the opportunities. But I know a lot of information security and consultants that have become a very good DPO. Just to let you know, our last bootcamp edition, a face-to-face program that Get Globals runs in Lisbon, there were 80% of our attendees were not lawyers, were consultants and information security professionals, and they did very well. They didn't have any problem in getting their foundation certification. That's pretty much on the legal aspect, and they have become very good DPOs. So
right, thanks so much for the feedback. So I will summarize what just mentioned.
Sure.
所以我刚才问了他这个问题啊，就是DPO 作为一个新的职业和岗位来说哈，对于某些公司是要求必须就 GDPR 2018年发布以后必须有的一个岗位。那他回答就是，其实，在巴西呢，很多人把这个拿到 DPO 这个认证作为一个升职或者是跳槽的一个机会哈，一个个人资格的一个机会。当然，随着2018年 GDPR 发布呢，很多公司对 DPO 这个岗位产生了直接的需求哈，这是其中一点哈，就是 purely 就是 personal 的这个个人的这个机会啊，个人的发展这样的一个新的一个路径。还有一点很重要一点，他强调了，其实改变了我们对 DPO 的一个误区哈。他说，其实呢，不只是律师需要啊，其实只有一小部分律师是需要的，大多数呢在巴西考这个认证呢，除了法律背景以外的呢，还有很多咨询顾问尤其是信息安全方面的咨询顾问哈其实有大量这方面隐私方面这个数据隐私保护方面的认证和资格的需求，然后再加上就是说很多企业重视这一块，它不但是给这种合规或者相关安全的部门去推广和学习，甚至一些业务部门跟数据打交道的部门 HR marketing 它都需要这个认证，所以在巴西的话这个普及的就比较好比较早他举个例子，刚刚就是在里斯本举办了一个隐私的一个训练营，80%的人都不是法律背景的，都是信息安全的背景，信息安全的顾问。但这里信息安全这里面发展的可能相对早一些，成熟一些，有大量的这种 base， 很多人呢都转了，或者在信息安全基础之上学习了这种隐私保护，然后基本上对于法律法规这层面，就是在 PDPF 基础级的层面都是没有问题的所以他针对这个为什么巴西在全球走得这么前面，给我做了一个简单的问题我看到那个我们这个向老师也提样有相关这样的一个问题也回答了他的这个问题。All right. I also got some questions from before the webinar. We collect some questions, so I will also on behalf and check with them. And if somebody have questions, they can also jump in or raise their hand. 如果大家有问题可以发在这个聊天区，或者说英文好的直接就可以开视频，直接互动这样可能更有互动性直接可以用英文问他问题。那我现在呢这边收集了几个问题，是之前我们的一些小伙伴提供的，我也帮助问一下Okay, there's a question about what is the current phase or status of data protection, in terms of development. What phase are out at this moment? This question from one of our audience.
Yeah, I would like to know regarding what place, because data privacy has different stage in different parts of the world. For example, in Europe is something that is quite advanced because the GDPR is already enforceable, has been enforceable for the past 2 years. In the US and Canada, I would say that is quite advanced, mostly because they have not, I would say, a national regulation, or at least not a comprehensive data protection law, but they have sectorial regulations. In Brazil, the law is just about to be enforceable. And in India, they are drafting the data protection bill. and China has its own standard on data privacy.
Right.
But just to complement this answer, Get Global has its name, the name Get Global, mostly because our slogan is that data privacy nowadays is global, and that's the reason we call ourselves Get Global, because data privacy actually nowadays is global. So you have the European standard, the American standard, the Chinese standard, but at the end of the day, there is some standard. So there is some data privacy, and we want our DPOs to be global, because multinational companies, they have global DPOs, and a global DPO should at least have some knowledge on the GDPR, on the Brazilian LGPD, on the US, on the California Consumer Privacy Act, because if your company will have operations in different parts of the world, that means that you as a global DPO will also have to run data privacy management programs in different parts of the world. You may be able to have a local DPO, but as a global DPO, you, at the end of the day, you are the one who's going to be responsible for it.
Right. Thanks. I will just translate your answer to the question. 所以刚才马修先生讲，就是刚才那个问题哈，对于这个 DPO 所处在的这个数据保护属于行业的发展阶段哈，在不同的国家肯定是有不同的阶段。当然在欧洲啊、北美啊，像加拿大呀，还有澳洲啊，它可能走的比较先前一些，像一些发展中国家呀，就包括印度啊和巴西啊，可能稍稍的就是说滞后一些，包括中国也有自己的相关的法律法规和法案要出台。但是他提到，就是作为你一个本地的 DPO 呢，你不但要了解这个 DPO 在本国的一个趋势哈，包括他这公司 Get Global International， 它其实就是帮助公司了解全球的这个数据隐私和处阶段啊，所以它这个应该有个全球的一个视角，所以就是提到就这个哈，然后下面还有一个问题哈，我也再说一下。So next question for you, Marcio, it's about
as you would say in Chinese, 好的。
好的 all right.
Wow, great. Okay.
Right. The question is going to be the independency of DPO and what are the constructive contribution of DPO. So can you share some insight about the independency of DPO and also constructive contribution? I mean, this could be to companies and to the individuals as well.
Yeah, that's very important. Under GDPR, the DPO needs to be independent. If there is any, let's say, conflict of interest between the company and the DPA, the Data Protection Authority, the DPO should help the Data Protection Authority and not so much the company, because even being the company's employee, this person needs to be totally independent. That's why under the GDPR in Europe, the DPO has legal obligations, legal responsibilities on what the company is doing and how the company is processing personal data. So mostly because you have legal obligations, you must be independent. Not the same thing in Brazil. In Brazil, you need to be independent, but you don't have legal obligations. So the company is responsible for what the company does. So it means that the DPO at least doesn't have a legal obligation on that, but it's still, you need to have independence. But in Europe, you need to be 100% independent.
Right. Thanks for the feedback. Very helpful. Yeah. 这个问题其实问得非常好哈。他的问题是 DPO 的独立性边界在哪里哈？建设性贡献在哪儿？刚才马秀讲啊，其实在欧洲，即便你是公司雇佣的 DPO， 你要站在隐私合规相关的权威组织机构这边你不是为你的公司工作，你有个人的这个法律义务，就 legal obligations for the authority。所以呢，即便你是他的员工，你应该履行你的作为一个 DPO 的一个法律的个人的义务去站在这个监管或者是 authority 这个层面，而不是站在你公司这个层面去保证。所以他应该有绝对的独立性据我了解，当然 DPO 可以是自由职业也可以是这个公司的员工这个应该是没有限制。但是你在欧洲的 DPO 要绝对站在公司的不站在就是站在authority 就权威的这个层面，而不是站在公司这个角度避免这个利益冲突 conflict interest。所以这点觉得有提到。当然他也提到在巴西呢，虽然个人没有这个 personal 这个 legal obligation 就没有个人的这个法律义务，但是公司是有义务的，公司是要承担责任的，要保证你的 DPO 是绝对中立的。看来在不同的国家都有不同的一个约束总而言之，回答这个问题是 DPO 要有绝对的这个独立性和中立性更要站在监管方而不是公司这个层面。Thanks for the feedback of this question. There's another question, but it's regarding want to share some information about data privacy in the usage of IOV. So I didn't know what IOV stand for, but I don't know if Marcio is ring the bell to you.
IOV, no.
All right.
No.
Okay, so 刚才有一个问题直接用英文提的就是 IOV 具体指的是什么？这个缩写大家可以给我展开一下不然那个我跟 Marcio 可能不理解他这个问题问的是什么还有一个there's another question that from my hand, which is the last one on my end. It says, Marcio, can you give some recommendations for those who are just came into the area of data privacy and DPO? What is your recommendation for their career development and things like that?
Yeah. First thing, I think it's definitely you should get your DPO certification. The certification shows you from an independent certifier as ICSIN that you have all the knowledge to be a data privacy professional. So definitely I would go for the certification. Our company, we have at least 2 of the certifications programs online in English. So if you want to start your to get all the certifications you would need to get the DPO certification, you can start getting the foundation certification. With that we have that online on demand. You can also get the information security certification. Global also has that online program on demand. And then you would go for the practitioner certification. That we don't have that online on demand, but I'm pretty much sure that once you get the 2 certifications from Get Global, probably it's not going to take too long. Probably some company will become a training partner in China, and you are going to have all the training that you will need to get all the certifications quite soon. If you want to have that in Chinese. But I would say that I would definitely go for the certification, mostly because it's an international certification.
Right.
So I would do that. And
right.
After getting the certification, you need practice. So if you have an opportunity to start working on a data protection management program, do it. Because many professionals, they have the certification, but they don't have the practical skills. So
right.
the both things would be the best things right away to become a data protection officer.
Right, thanks very much for the input. 刚才这个问题就是说，对于刚刚踏入隐私行业这个领域的从业者的一些建议那 Marcio 先生作为一个资深的一个律师或者隐私的方面的律师，他的第一个建议就是学一个隐私的这样的一个国际的认证就是刚才有提到像 PDPF 隐私认证这个是对你职业发展的一个 一个敲门砖也好，或者是一个入门也好啊，我们一直说认证是学习的起点，而不是终点啊。所以其实一个国际的认证，Exim 的认证是全球认可的，所以这个是他的一个建议啊。包括一些在中国或者在全球都有一些英文的或者本地的这样的一个培训授权培训机构啊，这是他第一个建议。第二个建议呢，就是说有很多人拿到认证以后呢，他确实没有实践经验。所以这个 management experience 或者是这种实践经验是非常重要的。第二个建议就是，当你拿到这个相关的资质以后，认证以后，一定要实践它，要积累一个实践的经验这就是我刚才对这个刚才提问的这个小伙伴的一个关于刚刚踏入隐私保护这方面职业发展的一个建议从这2点他进行了一个回答。还有一个问题这个问题直接用英文问的我跟大家分享一下，然后我也会问一下Marcio。Marcio, there's another question coming in. So what is difference between DPO roles and information security or IT audit?
Okay, very good question. The information security, our main purpose is to be sure that the data is protected. Okay, so it means any data, any kind of data, right? The DPO needs to be sure that the personal data is being used compliant with the law. So information security complements the DPO's obligation, the DPO's role, but it's not the same thing. The information security is not responsible for making sure that the company is processing the data, using the data compliant with the law. It doesn't have anything to do with information security. But it's a good question because we use the term data protection. So it sounds information security, but we protect the data not only because someone will there will be a data breach or something like that, but mostly because the company needs to process the data compliant with the law. So the DPO needs to be sure that the company will comply with the law, process the data compliant with the law, and information security needs to be sure that there won't be any data breach. Okay, I don't know if it's this difference is clear, but that's pretty much the difference.
And it's clear, but also he mentioned another role like IT auditor. IT auditor is going to audit pretty much the use of the softwares. Again, it won't be responsible for auditing the company if the company is processing the data compliant with the law. So you can have a data privacy auditor, and there will be. You can, for example, you can engage one of the big four, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, or Deloitte, or something, some of those companies to audit your company and see if the company is processing the data compliant with the GDPR. So those are the difference. Thanks very much. 这个问题问得特别好，他的问题是就是 DPO 的角色跟这个信息安全和 IT 审计有什么关系和区别哈？那刚才这个 Marcio 先生讲呢 ，DPO 呢它是确保你按照 GDPR 法案的方式来处理信息这个是从法律的角度来处理信息有没有去合规，而信息安全呢更看你有没有受到这个信息安全就是 breach 就是这种破坏就这种的角度，包括呢如果从审计的角度呢，你有信息安全方面的审计。但是它跟法律法规是没有关系的。如果你找4大呀，像华永道、KPMG、安永这些，你可以做隐私合规方面的审计。仍然跟审计的区别是它的角度不同。一个呢是看你有没有按照 GDPR 隐私保护来处理你的数据，这个是跟法律法规相关的。而信息安全呢，更看你有没有受到攻击或者保证你的这个信息安全。它俩还是有一个明显出发点的区别尽管从名字上听起来他们是之间有很大联系的当然 他也提到哈，这个两个层面，信息安全跟隐私保护是互补的。这也是为什么在 DPO 这张证书里面，它不但要求你要有信息安全2万级的认证，还要有2门隐私保护的认证哈。所以对刚才这个问题啊进行了一个回答。Right, thanks, Marcio. Let me check if there's more questions. Right? Are you okay with the timing? I think we almost there. Yeah. All right. Let me see. Okay. 这样，那个还有没有其他的朋友哈有问题的，可以在群里问，或者直接用英文跟他在这里互动可以哈。In the meantime, sorry, please go ahead. Is there a question from the group?
Hello, Marcio.
Hello.
Hello, Marcio. This is Patrick from China. So I have interesting questions about independence. I understand that you said so if we are DPO role, so independence is very important for us. But I think maybe I'm not sure this is an interesting question about if we are a company's employee, but we have a focus on the DPO role, how we can stand an independent role in the company, because I'm an employee of the company, because we needed to know, or we needed to make sure the benefit for the companies. So, but if we needed to keep the independent, so we need to stand side of the data protection authority side. So how we can keep the independency? So I think this is very difficult, maybe.
Yeah.
Very. Yes, go ahead.
Just can I translate his question to the rest of the group before you are back to the answer? 非常感谢赵先生是吧？是 Patrick 这个问题哈。这个问题我在咱们这个微信群里也有人问了哈。就是一个平衡，找到一个 balance。他就是刚才有提到，就是关于中立性哈。说如果我是我公司的员工，我怎么能不替公司的角度去思考，而是站在这个监管方哈。虽然他有这样的要求，但是我能如何做到，或者是如何能实现哈？同样这个问题在群里面我也给大家读一下。So we got a similar question from the WeChat group. Is like, how do we make the best balance of data protection and interest of the company? So which is similar to the question of Patrick.
Sure. And very good question. And it's a cultural change. So it's going to take a while to actually assimilate this change, because at the end of the day, it's not easy being the company's employee and being independent. But at least in Europe, the law says that the company needs to appoint a DPO, and the law says that the DPO needs to be independent, and the law says that if you are legally responsible for what the company is going to do. So if you are legally responsible for that, you want to be independent, the company needs to let you be independent, because if the data protection authority realize that the company's DPO is not independent, is not able to play the DPO's role, the company will get a fine. And yet we already have some companies, some European companies, getting in trouble, mostly because the data protection authority felt that the DPO wasn't independent, or wasn't even able to be independent. The general data protection regulation, in different parts of the regulation, inputs to the company the obligation to make sure that the DPO will be independent. But it's a cultural change. I understand that it's difficult to see that happening right away. But if we compare the DPO role with the compliance, the compliance chief officer, compliance is the same thing. The compliance area of the company needs to be independent, or it doesn't make sense to have a compliance area. So the DPO, in a daily basis, will be responsible for helping the company in complying with the law. But if there is a conflict of interest between in doing the right thing and the company, the DPO legally needs to do the right thing. Sometimes even inform the data protection authority. I know that sounds weird. And if you have an opportunity to attend any data privacy program in Europe, there is a very cultural shock. And I've seen that from some of our students from the US and from Argentina, from Brazil, when they attended our last edition of our data privacy bootcamp in Lisbon. Because one of our instructors was Fujitsu's DPO in Portugal. So it's an European DPO. And he started his presentation pointing everything that Fujitsu was not doing right away. And people was like, whoa. And he did that in purpose, because transparency is one of the principles of the GDPR. So if a company does that, that means that they are doing a good job, because they are being transparent. They are showing that they respect your privacy, and they have identified things that could be done better. And but that's a cultural change, I know. And that's the shock that he wanted to make in the class. And people were like, this. And he said, yes, because you need to be transparent. This is one of the principles. Because if your client doesn't feel that you are transparent, if you are a B2B business and your client feels that you are not processing their data properly, they are not going to close a contract with you anymore. And that's under the GDPR. European company, they are going only hire companies that are able to comply with the GDPR. You can be a Chinese company, but if you have a very good data protection management program in place, and I feel that your DPO is independent, and I feel that your company is transparent, maybe I will sign a contract with you. But if you don't have a data protection management program in place, there is no DPO, and there is a DPO, and I feel that your DPO is not independent, if it means that you, as the term that the GDPR uses, I don't know if you guys are aware of those terms, but there is the term controller and processor. The European company is the controller, and I'm going to hire your company to be the processor. You're going to operate, you're going to be the operator, you're going to process my data under my contract. But if you do something wrong, I'm going to be legally responsible. So I'm going to look for a Chinese company that has a data protection management program, an independent DPO. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, very helpful feedback. 所以刚才这个问题其实到目前为止，我觉得这个问题很有意思哈，就是以后我们有这个 DPO 俱乐部线下辩论会的时候，我们可以辩论这样的话题哈。我觉得这种话题是比较有争议的啊，就是它有点反直觉哈的感觉，就我翻译一下他刚才的回答哈，就是说刚才这个问题问的特别好，就是说如何来平衡公司的利益和这个法律法规、个人义务的要求啊，要求你应该不站在公司的这方面，也不一定是站在公司的对立面啊，就是站在这个权威这个方面。那他说，首先呢，这个问题是一个很好的问题，因为它是涉及到一个 文化的变革或者 culture shock， 对吧？这是一个很重要的一点，对很多企业来说或者员工 DPO 来说，他都会要找到一个平衡也好或者怎么样。但是呢，首先第一点他强调的这个，你作为一个中立的 DPO 是法律对你的一个要求，是一个 personal obligation 啊，不但是对你个人要求，对公司也是这么要求。如果就是这种合规部门或者相关的 authority 发现你的 DPO 不中立，公司会得到处罚的，就是已经有这样的案例哈，就是公司的 DPO 没有站在中立的角度，公司得到了处罚。另外 DPO 那个很重要一点 ，GDPR 里面就说到透明度 （transparency）， 这是一个非常核心的一个问题啊。所以说，如果你没有中立的话，其实你没有帮助公司，反而你是害了公司，因为公司会得到处罚，这是第一点。第二点，从业务角度来说，公司很关注它，既然看 GDPR， 它肯定是要跟欧洲或者是跟全球要有这种业务哈。那你在招标的时候、拿单的时候，其中一条他会看你有没有一个完善的隐私保护体系。如果你没有的话，不好意思，你可能连这个单你都拿不到，业务机会就会损失。所以你越中立越透明，你没有去你表面上看可能你对公司不利，但实际上你更大帮助了公司哈，因为这个我们说是 credibility 很重要，你给公司提供了很多的信誉。不管你是一家巴西的公司还是中国的公司，只要你在全球的招标系统中你符合了这个合规，还有这种中立性和透明性的 DPO， 其实你是在帮助公司哈。所以要找到从管理层或者从业务角度来说，让他认识你这么做其实是帮公司，而不是说没有站在公司这个方向哈。所以让他充分的这个认识到这一点哈。还有就是说到，就是刚才呢，他提到了一个特别有意思的一件事儿哈，就是刚才又是提到在里斯本举办的那个活动啊，就是 Privacy Bootcamp， 这里面呢有一个福基楚应该是富士吧，是吧？日本的这家公司，一个欧洲的 DPO， 他在那个活动中呢，专门讲他们公司哪些没有合规，没有按 GDPR 去做，就是等于说咱们中国话说家丑不可外扬啊，但是呢他这么做其实呢就是证明起码这个福基楚他这个 DPO 是中立的，而且是透明的，其实能帮他公司赢得更多的这种信誉和 credibility。当然我相信啊，作为一个 DPO 来说，你可以通过避免风险或者避免不合规来说来帮助公司，而不是说帮公司，这我个人的理解啊，或者掩藏或者就是这种，因为很多东西你是藏不住的。如果你从这个角度看的话，其实你前面都把公司该做的合规风险都规避了，当然你可以做的就是很中立、很透明，也不会有风险，这样其实才是公司雇 DPO 的一个真正的价值跟意义啊。后面这是我个人的一个理解，所以就是说这个问题问得特别好啊，我就是简单就是精炼的给大家总结了一下。但是他也承认哈，对于即便在欧洲国家，他们也开放程度啊或者发展程度也不一样，有些国家像德国呀，它可能更趋于保守啊。但整体来言，欧洲国家它这个个人的信用体制也很多年很完善，所以呢，作为这个 professional 啊，本身你是个 professional， 你就应该有中立性了，然后要符合你这个法律法规对你岗位的要求。那他又举个例子，他说除了 DPO 以外，实际上从合规人员来说，就 compliance officer， 你也是需要有绝对的中立性的，即便你不是做这个隐私数据合规的，你做一个合规的专业人员，你也是要中立的呀。所以这个跟这个 DPO 的角色在中立性这块是非常像的哈。所以那公司可能之前没有 DPO 或者是没有这个中立性，但是在合规这方面你是有相关的合规这个人员的哈。所以这一点的话，我们那个大家也就是做了一个简单的一个反馈哈。我看到还有一个问题，我看是不是时间也不早了哈，我看这问题还多了起来哈。我再读几个问题吧哈。因为我们有点正好到了1个半小时啊，但是我觉得今天这个问题可能刚刚把大家的兴致提了起来，我觉得我再读几个问题，而且这个问题都是英文的哈。Marcio, there's 3 more questions, so sounds like people become more enthusiasm about the discussions.
That's good. That's good.
Right, I will read through this. How can we avoid the data compliance risk scheduled by the black box operation or adequate samples when using automated decision-making techniques?
Very good question. First of all, you need to be aware of those things. So you need to every time run an assessment. Once you identify that your company is automatically processing personal data, we need to understand how this automatic process is being done. And just remember that under the GDPR, it's one of the data subjects' right to oppose to any automatic any processing of personal data that's being done automatically. Just to let you know, if you are looking for ICSIN's certification, there is one question that appears quite often in the ICSIN test. It's sometimes questions like one individual had his credit score done in a way that he felt that it wasn't right. Does this individual have the right to oppose to this automatic processing? And the right answer is yes. So as a DPO, as I said before, first you need to understand your company's business, you need to run the assessment, identify all the way that the company processed the data, if it's manually or automatically. And once you do that, you analyze if there is any risk, if that process is compliant with the law. If it's not, you need to propose change in the process to make sure that the company will comply with it.
Right. Okay, I will summarize your feedback. So basically, 所以他说啊，就是说，首先啊，你要做一个评估啊，评估无论是你这个程序，就是这个隐私保护的这个收集啊或者处理啊，是自动化的程序还是不自动化程序，你先要做一些评估，然后看看是否去合规哈。然后呢，他说在 ICSIN 的隐私保护的课程里面啊，就有这样的类似的问题啊，比如说问到一个人说，如果你发现啊你的信息被收集的过程中，通过自动化的这个工具也好，怎么你这个是不合规的，或者说是不安全的，你有没有权利去拒绝提供你的个人信息？然后这个答案应该是肯定的哈，是这样。所以就是说这个对这个时间关系啊，对这个问题做一个简单的一个回答哈。然后下一个问题啊 ，so for the next question, except the IT industry, what other industries in Brazil need DPO, such as medical treatment and manufacturing? I think this is also very relevant question.
Yes, actually, any company that process personal data, they need DPO. So all business probably are processing personal data nowadays. Banks, hospitals, universities, schools, even the government under the GDPR and the Brazilian LGPD, the government needs to comply with the law. So even the government, they need the GPOs, e-commerces, any company that process personal data in a large scale, or if the company process sensitive data, that's one category of personal data, will have to point a DPO, to nominate a DPO. So pretty much any company will have to point a DPO if they process personal data in a large scale.
Right, I got it. So 感谢这个是 Alex 提的问题哈，就是说可能相信很多人理解可能是只有是 IT 领域里面需要 DPO 啊，但实际刚才这个问题已经被这个 Marcio 回答了。任何一个行业，只要你处理个人数据的话，你都需要像 DPO 这个角色啊，包括银行，包括政府，包括电子商务啊，等等，只要你提供相关的处理相关个人的数据啊，你都是受这个法律这个制约的哈，所以你都要有对应这个岗位啊，包括医院啊、医疗啊，无论是你政府机关啊，都需要的哈。所以这个不只局限在 IT 行业，这是对这个问题的一个回答啊。然后最后一个问题吧，好不好？最后一个问题，这个问题the last question, Marcio, for you today.
Sure.
What is the difference between LGPD DPO and the GDPR DPO? Is there a difference? Yeah.
Yes, there is just one difference actually. Because under the GDPR, the DPO is legally responsible, and under the LGPD, the DPO is not legally responsible. But it's still, the DPO needs to be independent. It's still, the DPO is the liaison, the focal point between the data subject and the company, is the focal point, the liaison between the DPA, the Data Protection Authority, and the company, and is responsible for making sure that the company is compliant with the law. But the difference is pretty much this: the DPO is not legally responsible as it is under the GDPR.
Right, thanks. 所以区别啊，其实他们两个角色很相近，但是最明显、最直接的区别呢，就是 LGPD DPO 啊，它没有这个法律的义务，而 GDPR DPO 呢，它是有法律的义务的，这个是一个明显的区别。但是在二者之间呢，它都要求这个 DPO 有中立性和独立性，还有透明性的这些特点啊。All right, thanks really for your time. I'm sure there are still a lot of questions. We can keep in touch later. And this is your first time to have interaction with our Chinese DPO candidates or friends. I'm sure there will be another time. And when this whole thing, Corona is gone, we are also looking forward to maybe invite you physically to join one of our conference to deliver a topic. It's a very eye-opening and a lot of valuable input from us. So we are also planning to organize events like a DPO club, offline events. Also, we want to set up a track like privacy and information security track for one of our digital transformation conference. So I'm sure when the whole Corona get over, there will be opportunity to have you physically with us. And also on behalf of our audience today, really appreciate your time, early morning, and your wonderful insight and input.
Okay, me and Get Global, we are at your disposal. We would definitely be happy to help you anyhow, physically, virtually. So should you need any further assistance from us, we are open and glad to attend you.
Thanks. I will also translate back. 所以马修先生也很高兴有机会跟我们中国的 DPO 或者 DPO 未来的学员做一些互动哈。当然他也提供一些专业的 DPO 咨询啊相关的这些服务。如果有需要的话，也后面跟我们可以联系，我们帮你去引荐哈。当然，从 Exen 角度来说呢，我们是一家国际的认证机构。今天我们请到的是一个巴西的专业的隐私保护方面的律师哈。我们后面在其他的体系里面，在其他的国家，包括欧洲也会找到国际的专家。当然，我们也特别希望后面有更多中国本地的数据隐私合规保护的这个案例很多会从我们认证的 DPO 学员中出来我们共同建立这个隐私保护的一个生态以及来推动这个中国数据保护隐私保护以及在全球方面的一个发展，然后帮助到更好我们这样的公司那今天的分享就到这儿，感谢大家的时间后面可以关注Exen 数据保护 DPO 数据保护官的俱乐部All right, thanks, Marcio. I wish you have a nice day for the rest of the day. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye bye.
Wow. Surprise. I cannot say in Portuguese, Brazil Portuguese. I hope I will learn sometimes next time. Thanks once again. 感谢大家我们今天的直播就到这里结束。好，谢谢。